Bonjour à tous.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Essential topic here, how to make savings useful. There's a lot of savings in France and in the Western world, and a lot of things to finance. It's not easy to bring together the savings and the needs, and to talk about this essential topic. We're lucky to have a panel of high-level financial people. I'm very happy to see them here today. Yesterday, I went to see the Opéra de Quat'Sous by Bertolt Brecht, where the author didn't always say good things about bankers, but here today we will see how bankers can be very useful to society. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Anne de Guinée. I'm at the Figaro newspaper. I'm a journalist, but I'll hand over the floor to Christian de Boissieu, who is an economist from the Cercle des Économistes, who prepared the sort of the framing of this session. Christian, the floor is yours. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So microphone's operational, yes. So how to make savings useful? Useful for whom? Useful for what? So we will go over this question during our debate. Anne just said it. I'll talk about household savings. I'm not going to talk about, corporate savings or on the public de-saving that exists. And this is, I'll concentrate on the household savings, family savings. If I take a country like France, for example, the problem of household savings is not a question of quantity, it's really a question of quality. Savings in quantity exists. For 2 years now, 2020 and 2021, French people saved 150 billion euros, given the events, the pandemic. So this additional saving of 150 billion euros is not back in the circuit after 2020 and 2021. Why? Because there's a lack of trust. We're in a fog, uncertainties. And if we go over the figures of the first quarter of 2023, French people save, in average, I'm not talking about the people who are on minimum wages, but in average, the people save 18% of their income. Before the COVID, the savings rate was at 15% before the COVID in France. We're 3 points over what we could call the standard, if it means anything. So the problem is not quantitative, it's qualitative. And why? Because we are experiencing a situation which is a paradox, in which we never needed so much long-term investments. We need long-term investments to finance the energy transition, ecology. We need long-term financing to finance the digital revolution, to finance infrastructure in the field of education, health, and so on and so forth. And so faced with these long-term investment needs, we are in a period where the preference for cash saving or short-term saving has never been as strong. So there's a gap, a maturity gap that has existed in France for a long time. Since 44, 50 years, there's always been this gap between the long-term financial investment needs and the short-term savings. But I think it's been worsened by the pandemic, by inflation, and by what I call the fog in which we are, and uncertainties. And from that, I will conclude on this. What can we do to reconcile all this? There are four topics, four elements to take into consideration, maybe others, but anyway. First question, do we have in France the right financial products, the right financial tools? Secondly, do we have the right tax system to limit the risk? Very important question. Third question, do we have the good regulations on banks, insurance companies, Basel III, Solvability II, to enable the banks and insurance companies to finance the real economy? And do we have the right approach to deal with the the need of proximity investments? Do we develop the right tools to encourage what I call proximity savings with a view to the local needs? Thank you very much, Christian, for this intro and setting the frame of this discussion. So our panel members will try to address these questions. And your neighbor, Jérôme Bélardeau, you're the president of HSBC Europe. In the extension of what Christian was saying, in line with what he was saying, because these reflections take place in a context of strong inflation. So how this impacts savings. Thank you, and hello, everybody. I will react on what Christian said on the savings rate that went from 15 to 18%. We're talking about a flow, but the saver reasons in stocks, and its savings stocks is dropping. And so there's a problem. There's no over savings for a saver when there's an inflation. So there's less savings available and less buying power. Because of inflation. Keynes said that savings is equal to investment, so there's no economic issue here. But I see two. When you reason not at the level of the planet, but at the level of a country, there is an issue. When you think of selecting investments, savings can go to more or less interesting investments, depending on the selection process. At the level of a country, savings, instead of being investment in useful investments, it can be exported to finance other countries. At the end of the last century in France, beginning of the 20th century, France imported a lot of gold, exported savings towards Russia and Turkey. And there are a lot of countries that don't manage today to finance the useful investments of their countries due to a lack of attractiveness and competitiveness of their local framework, whether local, legal, tax, fiscal, what have you. And the second topic in the allocation of savings is, does it select the right investments, the most useful investments? So there are a lot of ideas to finance, you know that, and this selection process takes place either by finding using the savings of companies or public administrations, which are often negative, but anyway, or by using the financial system, which transforms it. So when it's enterprises, well, start from the principle that it's quite efficient, but to animate the debate, when a company has more savings than it has useful investments in its natural perimeter, the most efficient for them is to buy back their stocks and let their shareholders invest much more broadly. Fossil energy, for example, they generate a lot more savings than investments because we don't want fossil energies anymore. So what's most efficient is to give back the money to the shareholders so that they reinvest themselves in energy, health, what have you. And so they increase the efficiency of the savings. Diversification would be another solution. There's a big French, it works sometimes, but it's more risky. And another major topic is the households. Households, well, savings, they consider that as a deferred savings. So they want to preserve their buying power, and they want a certain level of cash availability. And as Christian said, there's an inadequation between these wills and the needs of the economy for long-term investments with different risk levels. So how can the financial system manage? Well, I see three conditions. First of all, control inflation. Never forget that the savings that goes through the financial system is in currencies, and the inflation rinses the cash savings, and this has stayed in the minds of everybody. Twice every century this happens, and so there's the savings of households go to real estate and safe investments. But in countries like France, who are not as ready to take risks, the problem is that the savings do not go to the financial sector. You have the countries in South America where you have no savings that go to the financial system. And so the investment system is totally inefficient in South America. And the second condition is you need a secondary market. Savings is short. The household savings are short because people want cash. But this short savings is ready to finance long-term investments if they know that in case of need they can take it out via a secondary market. So liquidity through a secondary market is a very important tool for more useful investments. What's very trendy today is to say, let's stay. So if you want to be efficient, what do? The private equity today is developing its secondary market today. So the savings is not afraid of the volatility of its value, a lot less than to have a return on false values. And the third condition, please, I'm sorry, your time's up. The third is transparent financial system, efficient with low intermediation costs. And we made a lot of progress thanks to regulations, MiFID II in Europe. And when you explain to the saver the reality of the risk in the long term, the appetite is much stronger. And a great objective of the financial sector in France is to educate the savers to the values, and which is we need a lot of education in France compared to English-speaking countries. Thank you very much. That's almost a second framing for this roundtable. Claire Chabrier, you are the president of France Invest, Association of Capital Investments. You're the director of Amundi, associated directors, and Claude, you're going to talk or explain how we can make savings useful, how capital investments can make savings useful. So thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for these two introductions. We're really at the heart of the subject. Make savings useful means allocating and being in phase with the needs of the economy. So obviously the needs of the economy are speeding up, financial needs. We're talking about 70 billion euros annually to find for decarbonation purposes, for example. We know these needs and these challenges will be massive in terms of amounts to invest, but also in terms of accompaniment. And I'm also talking about accompanying on industrial sovereignty, innovation, financing of innovation and renewable energy, and we'll have to go on that path and quickly. These are really important challenges, but they're double. Today we talk about financing solutions. Here we're talking about innovation. We know we'll have to finance industrial startups, the deep tech, to find accelerators when addressing the issue of decarbonation. But what we often leave aside and forget, and I think that's one of the messages I wanted to pass on to you, is transition. The transition we'll have to finance in all our companies, non-listed companies, SMEs, for example, which are mostly industrial activities which create jobs in France and are not necessarily well identified in their investment needs. And this will be on the long term. So why is this topic so key? Because there's a risk of just leaving these companies aside if they're not accompanied in these transition phase towards a sustainable development. So today it's one of our concerns. There are 120,000 SMEs in France, and we accompany 6,600. So we have to think of long-term financing involving the several ingredients. We talked about the amounts to finance. It means orient the savings of households. Will need to use this resource, and we'll have to accompany also. It's not only financing, but we'll have to accompany entrepreneurs to meet these challenges, complex challenges, and it's also the long term, and that's what capital investment people do. The good news is that we're well equipped in France because the capital investment industry in France is the first actor in Europe, in France. So we have a mature industry present on all our territories, close to the entrepreneurs. So that's part of the good news. But on the other hand, if we look at where we stand in the allocation of household savings in non-listed companies, we're talking about 0.1% of private savings invested in companies in France. So it's nothing. So we have a collective challenge to reorient this resource towards the productive economy of the SMEs. So we are doing that. Even if the figure looks really small today, many things are being done, politically speaking, because in the framework of the Green Industry Project or program, there's a real will to reorient the retirement plans. Lines are moving, and there's also a real topic with education, pedagogy, because we talked about these products that are not well known by the French population, whether in terms of the meaning they want to give to their investments, but also in the yield. When you talk about the usefulness of the savings, of course, the people are expecting to have a return on investment. Thank you very much, Claire.
Alors, votre voisin, Emmanuel Goldstein.
So, Emmanuel Goldstein, you're the boss of Morgan Stanley for France. Emmanuel, Claire was talking about the retirement savings. That's a topic you're interested in. So, Emmanuel, you were sharing with me a few ideas to make the savings useful. So it was very interesting. Thank you, Emmanuel. So we'll start with the observation that was made by Christian, is the lack of confidence or trust of French people in the future. So this steers the savings. So they tend to invest in risk-free investments. But to make savings useful, you have to reorient it in the great transformations that society needs. So what is our observation is that the financial savings stock is oriented towards the financing of public debt, life insurance, or the livret A. So we have to say a few words on public savings. What we need to observe is that the state will not be capable of financing all the transitions we need. The restructuring of the industry, the environment transition, the new mobilities, and so on and so forth. So we need to orient the savings of private savings to make it useful. So the public debt is 112% of the GDP today, so not a lot of leeway, and the redeployment, the savings done here and there will not be enough to face the situation. So we really have to work on making savings useful. If we adopt the path that we mentioned, so we have to reduce the public debt to avoid eviction. Secondly, there's the topic of retirement plans. Obviously, I think we will be talking about capitalization retirement. We have this with the PER plans, but there's a lot to do to make them more interesting or attractive. We have to reorient, and Claire mentioned that, towards local projects, the local reindustrialization, investments that have a better visibility for people who save. So savings is intermediate in its redeployment. I think it's very important to give the right visibility to the different savers. And so these are just a few tracks, a few ideas. Employee saving systems, for example. We still have means to improve all this, and we'll have to go in depth with this. But beyond these ideas, there's a setting. We are in France, the leaders of fiscal instability. So the first year we put in place a system because a minister wants to have his name put on a new system. The second year it's changed. The third year we fight against excesses. Then we do fine steering on the fifth year, and then we try to administrate. to administer we have to change the state of mind, the approach. If you remember, until a few years ago, there were different tax systems for savings. We set up the flat tax, 30%. We thought that it was impossible to impose the flat tax. There will be perverse effects, and it was a success, and that's what we need to have a stability, to reestablish the trust. We have to go to the roots of things. I'm not. There are a lot of economists sitting around this table, but the Ricardian equivalence, the fact that when the public expenditures are very high, and so the taxpayers know that they will have to reimburse that, but this is bad for making savings useful. So it's important to work at the source. And that's why I think the solution is to ensure the convergence of technical systems, but also embark the citizens in a real vision for the transformation of our society, accepting to take risks by redeploying their savings in a useful way. Thank you very much, Manuel. I hope that Bruno Le Maire is here and listening to this discussion. So Gregor Santi, you're the president and founder of Next Stage, an important actor of capital development, and you are interested in the political aspects behind this. And Gregor, you studied the question of sovereignty. Thank you, Anne. In fact, what's interesting is that if you step back a bit, we've noticed that for 10 years now we've been witness to a world shift in the financing of the real economy and the stock exchange markets towards private markets that have become the major source of capital asset investments in companies, in infrastructure, in real estate, and it's the key of the sovereignty that makes a country competitive, and it's at the heart of what explains the gap and competitive differential that exists between Europe and the U.S. since 2000, since the year 2000. So be reminded that today France has gone from 1 to 2% of the savings allocation in investment capital. In the U.S., it's around 15 to 20%. Because they've managed to manage the alignment of the active and passive of pension plans, for example, retirement plans, with a long-term investment in the economy to support the champions of the 21st century. And what's good, as Claire said, France is the leading country in Europe, but it shows how late we are and what we have to catch up on. And the second point is that Christian mentioned that 6,000 billion euros of savings, 6 billion euros of, no, 6,000 billion euros savings, but 45% of the savings of French people generate 0 to 1% in return. So between 4 to 45%, 0 to 1%. When you have an inflation rate of 5%, it's absurd. And you see that this 45%, with the reduction in savings, this has a big negative impact on the economic development of our SMEs, our medium and small-sized enterprises. We're in a situation of a country with a lot of small trees, but are not irrigated enough. And so not enough long-term investments that are carried out to accelerate the transformation of our economy. Jean Lemierre, who's an intern at BNP Paribas, and he said that more than 50% of the savings in Europe will be invested in the U.S. 50% of European savings will be invested in the U.S. economy. Do you think that 50% of the U.S. savings will be invested in Europe? Probably not. So the reverse is not true. what we should say is that the COVID crisis generated a new awareness of the challenges with sovereignty in the field of intelligent health, digital domain, environment transformation, and this. Now it's the time of capital assets, and I think the capacity to generate champions, and we've missed out on that. And what's at stake now is the capacity to ensure the emergence of champions around IA and intelligent health. And be reminded that SMEs today represent 55% of jobs, private jobs in France today, so 55%. And so the capacity to ensure their growth is essential. What I'd like to conclude with is performance. Well, we can generate 15% of TRI for savers. We have to give a new meaning, values, ensure proximity to investments for startups, using the enormous mass of savings. That's how we will be able to rebuild, reinforce our competitivity, our sovereignty, and give hope to our country in all its territories. Thank you, Grégoire.
You've mentioned the motto of the Rencontre des économistes, to revive hope. And the last panelist, Philippe Brassac, you are the CEO of the French Banking Federation, and you are the CEO of Crédit Agricole as well. And Philippe, we discussed sovereignty, policies, and then you wanted to adopt a different approach. The savers, so to make savings useful, but how these savers can get their bearings. So go ahead. I will digress a little bit. So you're right to identify, to sell useful saving for society, but useful savings for a saver. This is not a trivial question. You have banking advisors who want to care for the savers, and there's a societal project. Of course, I mean, you can be involved in the energy business through the savings, but regarding the savers, they want to manage their savings. This is what is at stake, in fact. So if you have an advisor with lots of insightful advice, is very important. If you want savers to invest in useful savings, allow me to take on what Christian said earlier. So when you finance transitions, the process is not fast, and I think that there's a consensus. The main problem is not the quantity of savings. You have thousands of billions of euros worth of saving with asset management, life insurance contracts. We have a high quantity of savings. It's not a problem having to do with the nature of savings, short-term or long-term savings. The main topic is that there are not enough projects to be financed. So I will say that immediately. Of course, I can finance many projects, but there aren't enough. And I will give you some examples regarding macroeconomics. If you consider the big projects, solar or wind projects, they are financed, they are funded. Regarding the farmers, methanization is a key point because you can produce gas from green origin. So there aren't a lot of projects of methanization in the pipeline. So there are lots of administrative issues, there's a lot of red tape. And then when you consider the households, they got some support in order to transform the buildings. Demand is quite low. Of course, we should have more specialists, but there's a contention bone. It's a wait-and-see approach regarding the generation of saving transactions. But should we better direct savings in France today? 2/3 of savings are managed or are managed by the customers. So people will talk about the destination of funding. Of course, with Eurofunds, the state is funded. And when you consider the indirect market, the common fund, the open-ended funds, they will choose these funds. And then you have the bank's balance sheet. We talk about banking savings. So it's important, to better direct those investmts. As Christian said earlier, you have a professional who will take risks with some expertise, and it will, or he will transform savings with sight deposits, taking into account long-term credits with fixed rates. This is possible through the asset liability management of liabilities, assets and liabilities. People don't talk about operable products. You have lots of political reasons. These savings should be distributed into layers. It means that savings will be more dangerous, less efficient. And allow me to warn you about that. International regulations, they don't like banking balance sheets. They prefer market mechanisms to put a rate for the economic agents. So IRRBB, these are English acronyms, but people are criticizing the fixed rate engineered by the banks for the borrowers, taking into account liquid savings. You have different types of savings. I think that we need to establish a link between supply and demand, and we need to manage savings in a more optimal fashion. So Brecht hasn't fully understood the complexity of the bankers' jobs. So 5 minutes for us, and then a 15-minute Q&A session. So Claire, regarding Philip's talk, we are not going to take upon the question of regulations. You are on the side of capital investment. Do you think that we don't pay enough attention to savers? I think that we can agree on a topic, so liquidities and cash. When you invest in the long term, people should be well informed. You need to explain to people what is a long-term investment. We are not saying here that long-term investments should account for 50% of the assets of a saver, but it's important to diversify your savings portfolio. The distribution networks should advise the savers on how they allocate savings. So it's a matter of diversification and training. regarding the market depth, if you may. As I said earlier, so capital investment companies have been advising 7,000 companies. So I can tell you that the market is quite deep, but it's like the topic of savers. It's a matter of education. It's a matter of training. Of course, Grégoire has talked about COVID, and the mindset of entrepreneurs has changed because they didn't open up their capital. And in 2022, it was the best year in terms of the number of people helped with capital investment. And capital investment funding is increasingly well known. So I think that the market is quite deep, but it's necessary to be informative. Capital investment is on the long term. So in France, it's a significant topic, but it implies economic knowledge. Grégoire. So Philippe talked about how complex it is difficult to manage capital investment. But when you have a savings bank account, it is 24 months. In life insurance, it is 12 or 14 years. You have an immediate constraint, immediate liquidity, immediate cash process. So most of their pension funds are invested in real economy. This makes it possible to make a difference, and this is quite sensitive as a saver. You will save 2% for 10 years. If you save at a rate of 15%, you will get a multiple of 66. So it's different for these savers, and that's quite tangible. Jean, maybe last word? Yes, I will have a Q&A session. Allow me to touch on what Grégoire said. There's a difference between France and the US regarding savings, the equity. And with equity, people don't trust equity in the long haul. This is something that we need to handle, because then you can do the maths, and people will turn to equity, so that make it possible to invest in the useful sectors that we mentioned earlier. Do you have some questions? So maybe two questions in a row. So we have two gentlemen. So Eric Niantet. I'm Eric Niantet. So don't make comments, but just ask a question so that we can have as many people as possible asking questions. Eric Niantet, I'm the head of the Énergisson company in Aix-en-Provence. I have a question regarding the contact people. So we listened to you. Of course, you have a lot of experience, but as an entrepreneur, we have a question. How can we reach the right contact people who are able to cater for our needs? We are talking about savings, but I would rather talk about investment. Of course, we want to be supported regarding investments. We want to take part in the savings business, but there's an in-depth issue. You have different profiles. How can we find the right person who will help you? Claire has given us some information, 120,000 companies or 121,000 companies, because I'm interested in what you've said. So we need to work with the right people in order to get a better insight into the situation. There's another question here at the back. Go ahead. So 3 questions. So 2 Two questions? No, one question, please. Regarding the quantity of savings, allow me to make a comment. So we have been spending too much. Have a look at the balance of payments and have a look at the debt GDP ratio. This has an impact on available savings. And what about the financial offer? We have some products. You mentioned life insurance and savings plan, but you need to change the tax system. This is a comment from Mr. Le Maire. And within this mechanism, you've talked about equity. When the financial offer is predominantly unit accounts accessible on the secondary market, you don't finance working capital requirements. So we need to change the capital investment. It should be highlighted. With the financial offer, you have lots of account units for the companies that need them the most. So remember the question, because you will have to answer. So Thibault Cornaré, do you think that mutual organizations of the savings banks, do you think that they can generate more useful projects, especially for non-listed companies? So Emmanuel, maybe you can give us an answer. I want to make sure that everybody speaks mutual savings banks. So what can you tell us? What about financial products? I mean, are they useful? I will start. So regarding the mutual banks, so what is organized in a macroeconomic way? How can we make sure that we target as many customers? Macroeconomics doesn't exist. It is the sum of microeconomies. So we need to consider the different stakeholders. So there are lots of economic players. You have savers, you have entrepreneurs. And I think that we need to get banking and financial organizations using a DNA whereby you have a local presence, you are involved in the regions. Optimization is key. And we need to get some organizations that are able to be efficient. And what is important is to have a granular approach. 92% of requests for investment credits from small and medium-sized companies are being accepted. So of course, we need to deal with the 8 remaining %. And you have banks and financial institutions, I mean, can provide a granular approach to the economy. Claire, I can answer the first question. If you want to get some funding, if you have a growth-based project, and if you want your company to develop, you have 400 people involved in capital investment, and they are present across France, and I can see some of them in the room, and they are very active in your region. So go to the France Invest site. So this is a process that is well documented. We are the first player in the EU, and we are quite involved, quite present. We have a granular approach in many regions. That's quite important, especially when you want to support the young entrepreneurs and the startups. Another question, maybe? I'm Sami. I'm a student in a business school. So I listen to these debates, the eviction effect, the Ricardian philosophy, but what about the capital-based pension system? So if you have a self-funded pension scheme, maybe it would be a good idea to target savings and which could lead to a higher public deficit. I talked about that. That's quite normal. You are a student, and in fact, there's a lack of attention, especially at this time. But you're right. So we talked about the self-funded retirement scheme, but how do you exit a savings plan? So for each case, I mean, there are some side effects. It's a matter of stability. It's important to nurture a climate of trust and confidence for investments. But allow me to highlight another point that goes with the other points raised by Philip. If you consider our financial and economic culture, it is not really well developed. It has to be bolstered, because if it is not beefed up, people will be risk-averse. You are told we have lost some money with the investments, and people will turn to the savings bank accounts or the treasury bonds that are a safe haven. And there are lots of side effects that are induced. If you consider the property prices, they are down, and they will continue to dwindle, because when interest rates rise, property prices go down. You have the SCPI. This is a savings product. This is a pension savings product subscribed by people who are 45 years of age, 50 years of age, and they think that it's a safe investment. And the marketing authority, they published a note. People should be warned that your capital won't be warranted, especially in the property industry. So it's a lack of economic and financial culture. And this can be conducive to people making decisions that are not relevant. People will be risk-averse. So investment in equity will provide some yields and a return on investment that will be higher. So we have some students in the room. They want to work on economic culture. So can you hand over the mic to the lady who is in the front row? You've talked about the lack of confidence. So there's a lack of financial education, but a lack of trust, lack of confidence. Why is it the case? And people mistrust the financial institutions. That's a very good question, because this is the theme of these 2 days. So if we want to be hopeful, confidence is key. I think that we can wind up the round table with this question, so you can give us an answer in 20 seconds. How can we nurture trust in financial institutions? And then, Christian, you will be able to summarize the debate. So let us start with Grégoire, then Philippe, etc. So we've talked about the lack of financial and economic knowledge of French people, but it's important to have a long-term vision in order to nurture trust. If you have a long-term investment in stocks, the more the investments will perform for the savers. So what is at stake is to build confidence through a long-term vision. And when you are Bernard Arnault or François Pinault, you are offered a capital investment product. But if you want to propose a capital investment product, I mean, you cannot target 50 or 60 million French people. These solutions have to be embedded in savings plans, in employee savings schemes. And this is how you can build trust. I think that we shouldn't ask individuals to have the same level of confidence as professionals or bankers. Bankers or the capital risk specialists, they have an edge. We manage the statistic stability. An individual cannot do that. For example, a person will suffer from some events in life. So liquidity of saving is key. So the intermediaries, the middlemen are required in order to take into account the unstable situation of citizens, basically to dampen the shocks of life, to move from micro volatility to macro stability. Emmanuel, what can you tell us about that? How can we trust institutions again? But I will specify a point. Education and awareness raising. It's important to focus on economic and financial approaches. We need to create a forum. It's not a matter of pushing savings-related product. Professional investors will distribute their products, but it's important to have a neutral fora in order to raise awareness. That's the case here today. And we need to focus on some simple concepts. That's very important in France because we tend to say that initial training is important, but long life education, long life awareness-raising campaigns can foster confidence and risk-taking. You need to take into account risks and rewards. There's a risk level which is in line with the return on investment, and people should understand that. So these basics and fundamentals should be reminded of. So if you want people to trust in us, so how do we help companies? How do we make sure that we support companies? How do we create jobs? This is something that we can measure year after year. How our country can be stronger in terms of sovereignty, and I think that we have lots of data. So the institutional investors, they have trusted us because they've got the data. They're able to see performance and value creation. We have got the figures. We need to show the work that we've done. We've been supporting many companies. We've talked about growth and yields, but there's something that we shouldn't forget about. Savings, externalities, climate, biodiversity, value sharing. So we need to walk the talk, and we need to be more transparent in terms of awareness raising. So information is transparent, but this is something that we need to show, to highlight. So nobody can be against that. So it's a virtuous circle for everybody, for the savers, for companies. So we've got all the building blocks of trust and confidence. Jean. So people have some mistrust in the current situation of our country, given the high level of debt. So in fact, you are passing on the problem to others, but you're right. So 2 minutes for you. Philippe Brassac has reconciled himself with macroeconomics. I'm very happy about that. So trust, confidence, transparency is key. Transparency is key. There's a point that we haven't addressed, but we don't have bankers around the table, but the banker would offer some products that wouldn't have an interest in buying them. because the savers shouldn't see that there's a conflict of interest between himself and the service provider offering some products. That is very important in terms of trust and confidence. So one of my colleagues told me, Mr. de Boissieu, should I put my savings elsewhere than in a bank? So in France, you have the warranty of deposits to the tune of 100,000 euros per account. And today, bankruptcies do not exist in France, but it's rather in the US, in California, so we shouldn't be afraid. Regarding awareness raising and education, I do agree with you. I'm a teacher, I'm an academic teacher, but so what about awareness raising and education? It's a matter for the secondary education. Financial and economic education is not well delivered in higher education, in secondary higher education. At universities, there are some students who think that they've studied economics in the secondary high education schools, but that's not the case. Regarding education at the AMF College, Nabila, an influencer, on the internet, on the social networks, I mean, she told people to buy Bitcoins. You will make a lot of money with Bitcoins. At the Financial Marketing Authority, we published a press release regarding Bitcoin. With other assets, you can make money, but you can lose a lot of money as well. So when you look at the ads on TV, on radio, if you listen to the ads about financial products, there's an information about risks. I'm almost done, but allow me to add something that you've alluded to, but a point that I would like to raise. If you have a look at portfolio management books, they are going to tell you what is important is the yield and risk concept. But what really matters is yield, risks, cash, liquidities, and the savers should have a look at this threefold approach. So thanks a lot for your kind attention.
Merci beaucoup à tous les.
Thanks a lot to all of you. So Brecht, in fact, can rewrite his play. Thank you.